So in the last video, we looked at scope and how it worked in JavaScript, how that functions had their own scope, and a function within a function has a pointer to the outer function. So if it can't find a variable in its own scope, it'll follow that pointer to its outside environment and look inside that scope all the way up to the global space and then to null, which means it wasn't found. And then anything declared in a function is visible throughout that function. So there's no block scope. There's no anything in the curly braces cannot be seen outside the curly braces, which is block scope. We don't have that in JavaScript. How does this work? I mean, in the global space, when we load our code, we're not inside of a function. So if it's functional scope, how does that work in global? Well, it's because behind the scenes, there's an object called the execution context. JavaScript engines keep a stack of these contexts. So when we first load our code into a global space, there's automatically a global context already on the stack. So your code's being evaluated against that. Your scope lives inside there, inside the execution context. And one of those is created every time a function is called. So each function creates a new execution context with its own scope, okay, and a pointer to its outside environment. Now, when code enters the function, the execution context is pushed onto the execution context stack. When it leaves, that execution context is popped from the stack. So all code in JavaScript is being run against an execution context on the stack. That's very important. You could literally look at your code and draw a box around each function and think of that as the execution context. A lot of things start clearing up when you do that. But it's not the execution context that keeps the scope, that keeps the bindings. There's a property in there called the lexical environment. Every execution context has a lexical environment, and that's where the scope is. There's a scope in there. It's called an environment record, and there's also another property called outer, which is the pointer to the outer lexical environment. And we're going to talk about that in the next video.